Okay, video number 2. South Carolina passed a law, number 20. South Carolina passed a law to increase the state tax on gasoline to help fund repairs on highways and bridges. The state tax is in addition to the federal tax on every gallon of gasoline that is sold. Pay attention to that wording. The state tax is in addition to the federal tax on every gallon of gasoline that is sold. Which of the following constitutional provisions does this scenario illustrate? C. Concurrent powers. Concurrent powers are those shared by state and federal government. Exclusive powers, D, would be powers that are not shared, that only the state government has or only the federal government has. Delegated powers refer specifically to the federal government. Reserved powers refer specifically to state governments. But C, this is a concurrent power. Also, I should probably point out number 22. All right, 21. Which of the following scenarios best explains the inclusion of Title IX as part of the Education Amendments of 1972? Title IX, just another, term that you should be familiar with from Unit 3. Title IX, you should think women. Gender, specifically in college sports, but there was more to it than that. But we have A, members of Congress added the amendment to the bill in response to social movements seeking to address inequality in education for women. The only one that mentions women is A, so don't overthink it. You just have to know what Title IX is. 22. One of the harder questions on the test, only 37% of people got this right when it was actually given as an AP exam. Which of the following is an example of Congress using its implied powers? The answer is C, Congress passing occupational safety regulations for the private sector. The others, that it's hard, I think, because we generally associate C, the actions in C with the bureaucracy, but Congress does pass, regulations. And then the bureaucracy makes the rules about those regulations. Anyway, it is not an enumerated power of Congress to do that. So it's a tough question, but the best answer is C. 23, we have America's trust in the mass media from 1996 to 2015. Which of the following statements about America's trust in the mass media is best supported by the data in the graph? Answer there. C, it generally decreased over time. It experienced its largest decrease in 2016. D, I remember some people think during the test saying, how can that not be true? Well, you just have to really, really closely look at these graphs. And ultimately, you have the percentages over here. It's a little difficult to read, but this looks like a pretty precipitous drop, and it's from 40 to 32, that's an 8% drop. Look, right, 2003 to 2003 to 2004, 54 to 44, 10% drop. It looks like that might be the biggest drop. It's not. Slightly, it is not. So D is not true. The answer is C. Which best describes a likely reason for the information depicted in the graph? An increase in concerns over media bias. They like to ask about that. These others are a decrease in ideological news coverage. No, it would be an increase if that were true. So the best answer is definitely A. 25. Which of the following is an example of checks and balances? Another difficult question. B, a rule issued by a bureaucratic agency may be declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. They can do that. I think a lot of people maybe got that one wrong because they didn't realize the Supreme Court can do that. Remember, the Supreme Court can declare the actions of any other branch, in this case the executive branch, to be unconstitutional. Why is a filibuster being ended by cloture in C and not an example of checks and balances? That's all within the Senate. It has nothing to do with different branches affecting each other. A treaty negotiated by the president with a foreign government must be approved by a majority of the House. That's just false. It has to be approved by the Senate. So there's just sometimes just false statements in there that sound true. And an unpopular Supreme Court ruling cannot be overturned by Congress in A. They could pass a new law, but they can't overturn a Supreme Court decision. So you just got to be careful with the language. B. 26. On November 2nd, 2014, a Gallup poll reported that 51% of Americans support legalizing marijuana, while 47% oppose legalization. The reported margin of sampling error was plus or minus 4%. Which of the following inferences can be made from the poll? Well, if the sampling error is plus or minus 4%, that means that it could be off by as much as 4% over or 4% under. Therefore, given that 47 and 51 are right within 4 percentage points of each other, the answer is what? D. It is unclear whether more people support marijuana legalization than oppose it. You can't use that poll to argue one of those things given the sampling error. 27. Which of the following situations is an example of the president using the bully pulpit as a tool for agenda setting? D. President Reagan delivering a televised address urging a reduction in federal taxes. A. An executive invoking executive privilege. B. Issuing a signing statement. C. An executive order. None of those have specifically to do with the bully pulpit, which is trying to address the public. Trying to use your platform as president to convince the public. So it's got to be the televised address, a speech, whatever. 27D. 28. The percentage of the United States population living in poverty by state in 2015. Which of the following is true based on the information in the map? That would be D. The poverty rate in the United States varies by state and region. It's the only one that you can fully support, the most general one in this case. 29. Which constitutional principle best explains the difference in poverty rates presented in the map? So it's like two really stupid questions, like that you just have to be careful and not overthink. There's almost nothing about poverty in any of these questions. It's just which constitutional principle, number 29, best explains the difference in poverty rates? Federalism, when states are different from each other and different from the federal government, that is federalism in a nutshell. B. The Supreme Court appellate jurisdiction. We have the United States Supreme Court, and then we have state courts on the right, federal courts on the left. They say state, and right here, and you just have, when it says United States District Courts, you should know that means the federal court system. 30. Which of the following statements best explains the diagram? That would be C. Cases arising at both the state and federal level may be appealed to the United States Supreme Court. Whoop, whoop. There you go. 31. Which of the following describes the origin of the United States court system presented in the diagram? Well, where do they say, what courts should be set up? In the Constitution. Is it Article 2? No, because you know that Article 2 is about the executive branch. It is Article 3 about the judiciary. C. 32. Which of the following is an example of the executive branch implementing a public policy passed by Congress? Remember, we've had 2 questions like this over the course of the year, including this one itself, and it is a fairly hard question, but it shouldn't be. It's just, boom, the executive branch implementing policy, which is passed by Congress. That implies the bureaucracy. Look for a bureaucratic agency. I see one in A. And I see one in C. I think that's what makes it difficult, because the Department of Health and Human Services is a cabinet department, and it says determines eligibility requirements for government assistance. Well, that's I'm literally freaking out. I'm like, but that sounds right. It is right. A is the answer. C has a bureaucratic agency in there. A Federal Trade Commission official is asked to testify before Congress. That's not implementing policy passed by Congress. That's about congressional oversight. So just put those 2 things together. Looking for a bureaucratic agency, but then which one is a bureaucratic agency implementing public policy? And it's A. 33. Which of the following illustrates a situation that would not be protected by the First Amendment due to time, place, and manner restrictions? We've talked about that. The answer is C. Anti-business protesters are arrested and prosecuted for shutting down major intersections. That's the place. Can't do it. You're stopping people from getting to work. It's during rush hour. Doesn't matter what you're saying. You're doing it in a place that is causing problems for law enforcement. C. Congress passes a law requiring that all public accommodations provide access for people with disabilities. The United States Supreme Court rules that the law does not apply to the airline industry. Which of the following is the best way for Congress to provide people with disabilities access to the airline industry in light of the court's ruling? So this is ultimately a question. It's like a specific scenario, but it's a question about checks and balances, about how the court interacts with Congress, about what each branch can do. So 34 is that a difficult question? No, not too difficult. C, pass a new law. What can Congress do? Pass a law. Can it appeal a Supreme Court decision to a lower court in A? No. Can it override the court? No. They keep saying that, and they can't do it. Can they remove members of the Supreme Court and appoint new justices? The way they're phrasing that is like, no, they could remove them technically through impeachment, but they can't appoint new justices. The only thing Congress can do is pass a new law. It specifies that airlines must provide access for people with disabilities. 35, which of the following scenarios best explains how the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment has influenced political behavior? The answer is C. Civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr. cited constitutional arguments as a basis for opposing segregation and inequality. Remember, equal protection, you think civil rights. Oh, look, one of these answers is about civil rights. Okay, go with it. Due process, you think civil liberties. Equal protection, you think civil rights. Due process, you think civil liberties. Equal protection, you think civil rights. Review. You got it. Percentage of liberal decisions of the United States Supreme Court in civil liberties and civil rights cases. Oh, we just talked about those two things, but now we're talking about both. Unit 3, civil liberties and civil rights. 1888 to 1996. Wow, that's a long time. Liberal decisions. It's not saying democratic because the party has changed. But what about liberal decisions? 36, based on the data in the chart, which of the following is true? B, the percentage of liberal decisions made by the Supreme Court on civil rights and civil liberty cases decreased between 1964 and 1996. All right, here we go. We're up here, and now we're down here. That's just true. It decreased. Pick the one that is true. Take some time to read the chart, but pick the one that's true. 37, which of the following factors most likely led to the shifts in Supreme Court decision-making over time? Difficult question, but the answer is A, the ideological composition of the justices on the Supreme Court shifted to become less liberal over time. Which of the following factors most likely led to the shifts in Supreme Court decision-making over time? It's difficult because you can see that obviously the composition became more liberal and then became less liberal. So the others just aren't true. It's the best answer, though it's phrased in a way that makes it difficult, but the best answer is A. 38, the Washington Post receives a top secret report that details how the executive branch mishandled a deal made with a foreign nation regarding nuclear weapons. Okay, some made-up scenario, but what's the concept behind the scenario? Let's get to it. The executive branch attempts to stop publishing of the report, but the publishers cite the precedent in New York Times Company versus United States. Oh, one of our required Supreme Court cases. It's the freedom of the press one. And what do we care about in that case? We care about the heavy presumption against prior restraint. C. Prior restraint means the government telling journalists, newspaper publishers, and media outlets what they can publish, what they can or cannot publish prior to it being put out there, published, and you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to censor journalists before it was published. 39, a person votes for Democratic candidates based on the belief that the policies of the Democratic Party will be personally beneficial. This type of voting matches with which of the following voting behavior models? We talked about these briefly. They're saying, you just have to know what these terms mean. Prospective and retrospective voting. Split ticket voting and sociological voting. Those are, terms that don't show up as specifically, and we probably don't have to know them. Split ticket is when you would just vote for Republicans and Democrats. That's not what's going on here. But I think the Democratic Party is going to be personally beneficial to me. I'm going to vote on, they don't actually put rational choice voting in here, which could be an answer, but based on the options they give us, What are they going to do? How are they going to act? For me, that's